Welcome back to Wives Gone Wild. Thank you for your loyalty. What town are you in right now? We're curious where these secrets find you. Here's today's cheating wife story. You know, when we love someone, we see them through the softest lens. We believe in them, even when the signs tell us otherwise. We tell ourselves, this is just a rough patch. We'll get through it. Things will go back to the way they were. That's exactly what I did. My name is Duke, and I won't pretend my marriage was perfect. It wasn't. No marriage ever is. Life happens, and somewhere along the way, the connection we once had started to fade. I was struggling. My business was failing, bills were piling up, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavy on my shoulders. Cassandra and I weren't as close as before, and though I noticed the distance, I chalked it up to stress. But I never, not for a second, believed she was pulling away because of someone else. Our anniversary was approaching, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we needed a reminder, a special night, a moment to rekindle what had been lost. So, I made reservations at a beautiful restaurant, planned everything down to the last detail. A small effort to bring us back to the way we once were. I had no idea that Cassandra had already found happiness elsewhere. The night before our anniversary, we were home as usual. She was on the couch, half watching something on TV while scrolling through her phone. A normal evening. One of those countless moments that blend into the routine of marriage. At some point, she got up, grabbed a towel, and headed for a shower. "What are we eating tonight?" I asked casually. She paused in the doorway, looking over her shoulder. "Just use my phone and order our usual," she said, disappearing into the bathroom. It was nothing out of the ordinary. A simple exchange, one we had 100 times before. But fate has a cruel way of playing with people. As I unlocked her phone, a message popped up at the top of the screen. A single line that changed everything. "Damn, babe, I'll miss you this weekend. But I get it, anniversary and all. Can't wait to see you next week." I read it once, then again, and again. My brain refused to process it. My heart pounded as my hands moved on their own. I tapped the message, opening the full conversation. And that's when my world shattered. The text stretched back for months. Every line, every word, was filled with a passion I hadn't seen in my wife for years. Excitement, desire, intimacy. She had told this man, her lover, that she wouldn't be available over the weekend because of our anniversary. And him? He wasn't upset. He understood. He was patient. He was already planning their next meeting. I scrolled further. My fingers trembled, but I couldn't stop. Each message I read chipped away at my heart, crushing it bit by bit. The things she said to him, the confessions, the laughter, things I hadn't heard from her in a long time. She was living an entirely separate life, slipping between two worlds with ease. And every night, she came home to me, to our bed, to the man she had long since left behind. Anger surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed proof. Quickly, I took screenshots, every message, every photo, every sickening detail. Then, without hesitation, I transferred everything to my phone. By the time I placed her phone back down, my entire world had shifted. And yet, Cassandra had no idea. She was still in the bathroom, humming softly as she went through her nightly routine, moisturizing, tying up her hair, completely at ease. She was living her life as if nothing had changed. But for me, nothing would ever be the same again. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have stormed into that bathroom, demanded an explanation, screamed, cried, anything. But I didn't. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. So, I walked into the living room, picked up the remote, and turned on the TV. I don't even remember what was playing. My mind was drowning in the reality I had just uncovered. And when bedtime came, I still couldn't bring myself to walk into that room, to lie next to her. The thought of her warmth, of her lips, of her hands touching me after they had touched someone else, it made my stomach turn. So I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, lost in the weight of betrayal. But as the night dragged on and I assumed she had fallen asleep, I finally stood up, my legs heavy as I made my way to the bedroom. She stirred as I lay down. Then, as if nothing had happened, she rolled over, resting her hand on my chest. Then she leaned in, her lips barely brushing mine in a sleepy goodnight kiss. And that's when the words slipped from my mouth. "I'd kiss you, but I don't want to taste your boyfriend." Cassandra froze. Her lips hovered just inches from mine, her breath caught in her throat. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I watched as her sleepy expression shifted, confusion first, then something else. Fear. What? She whispered, her voice shaky. She blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the weight of my words, trying to convince herself she had misheard. I almost laughed, not because any of this was funny, but because of how predictable she was. The way she immediately slipped into denial mode, scrambling for control, as if she thought she could talk her way out of this. But I wasn't playing that game. Not tonight. Not ever again. I sat up slowly, reaching for my phone on the nightstand. With a calmness that even surprised me, I opened the folder where I had stored every single piece of evidence. Then, in the same measured tone, I began to read. Line by line, word for word, her words, her texts, her betrayal. I barely made it through a few messages before she cracked. Wait, please, let me explain, she gasped, lunging toward me, her hands grabbing desperately for my phone. But I was faster. I stepped back, holding it out of reach. She collapsed onto the bed, her shoulders shaking, hands covering her face as sobs tore through her. I'm sorry, Duke, she choked out between ragged breaths. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I said nothing. I don't know, I got caught up in something. It didn't mean anything. I tilted my head, studying her. And then, in the calmest voice I could muster, I asked, how do you feel knowing you did all of that with him, and still came home to kiss me with the same mouth? She didn't answer. What could she possibly say? She just sat there, frozen, her face pale, her body trembling as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. And me? I didn't care anymore. I turned around and walked out of the room, leaving her there, alone, drowning in the mess she had created. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't sleeping next to her. The days that followed were a blur. I wish I could tell you I woke up the next morning with a clear mind and a solid plan. That I knew exactly what to do, how to handle the situation, how to move forward. But I didn't. Instead, I just existed. I went to work, came home, went to work again, came home again. I barely spoke. I barely ate. I barely even thought. I was a man moving through life like a ghost, trapped in the routine of a marriage that no longer felt like my own. And Cassandra? She acted like nothing had happened. At first, she pretended we could go back to normal. She would ask about my day like she always had, forcing a soft smile, hoping I would return it. She would linger near me, touching my arm, standing too close, trying to remind me that she was still there. At night, she would slide into bed beside me, but I never turned to face her. The space between us felt like an ocean. I was there, but I was gone. When her casual attempts at mending things didn't work, she tried harder. One evening, I came home late. The smell of food filled the house, my favorite meal. I walked into the kitchen and saw the table neatly set, the plates waiting, the wine poured. She stood there, hands clasped in front of her, eyes hopeful. Waiting. Hoping. I didn't say a word. I glanced at the plate. Then, without a second thought, I walked past it, straight to the bedroom. I didn't touch the food. For the next week, she kept trying. She needed me to react, to get angry, to feel something. Anything would have been better than the silence I gave her. But I had nothing left to say. I didn't see her the same way anymore. And that's when I knew. This marriage, it was already over. Some endings don't come with fireworks. They don't come with shouting or doors slamming shut. Sometimes, the most painful endings happen in silence. That's what it was for me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg her to explain herself or give me a reason. I had seen enough, heard enough, felt enough. And now, all I had left was emptiness. Cassandra, on the other hand, was grasping at straws. When her soft smiles and small touches failed, when I refused to meet her halfway, she tried harder. She started waking up earlier than me, making coffee just the way I liked it. Except now, I barely touched it. She lingered at the door when I left for work, her eyes searching my face, waiting for a goodbye kiss that never came. And every evening, when I returned home, she was there, standing in the kitchen, preparing my favorite meals, setting the table, pouring the wine. A picture-perfect wife. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought she was happy, that we were just a normal couple sharing a quiet, intimate dinner after a long day. But I knew better, and so did she. Each time I walked past the carefully set table, past her hopeful gaze, past the life she was desperately trying to piece back together, I felt her breaking. But I didn't care. I let the silence punish her. Days turned into weeks, and I watched as her patience began to unravel. She grew desperate. The casual attempts to mend things turned into pleading. She would sit beside me on the couch, reaching for my hand like she used to. Only this time, I didn't squeeze back. She would follow me to the bedroom, curling up beside me, whispering apologies in the dark. Some nights, she cried herself to sleep, but I never held her, because I wasn't her husband anymore. Not in the way that mattered. She may have still worn my ring. She may have still carried my last name. She may have still lived in our home, slept in our bed. But in my heart, she was already gone. One evening, after another long day of pretending, I finally spoke. Sit down. She hesitated for only a second before lowering herself onto the couch across from me. Her hands twisted in her lap, her breathing uneven. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Then, without a word, I placed it on the table between us. Her eyes flickered down. She didn't move at first, didn't reach for it, didn't even breathe. But I knew she recognized it, knew what it was. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "What is this?" I leaned back in my chair, my tone steady. "Sign these, or I share your secret with everyone you know." For a split second, I saw something in her expression. Shock, maybe even fear. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew that if I wanted to, I could destroy whatever respectable image she had left. Then, like clockwork, the tears came. "Duke, please." But I was done listening. I watched as she reached for the papers, her fingers trembling. I watched as she wiped her face, smudging mascara across her cheeks. I watched as she picked up the pen, hesitated, then signed her name. And just like that, it was over. No fight. No dramatic last-minute pleas. Just a quiet ending to something that should have lasted a lifetime. Cassandra still had her job, still had her money. On paper, she was fine. But what she lost was so much greater. She lost a stable home, a husband who would have done anything for her. And worst of all, she lost the respect of everyone who would one day ask, "Why did your marriage end?" And when that question came, I wondered, would she tell the truth? You'd think that once the divorce was finalized, that would be the end of it. That Cassandra would sign the papers, accept the consequences, and move on. But that's not what happened. Cassandra didn't want to let go. At first, it was subtle. A simple, "Hey, how have you been?" A random meme she thought I'd find funny. A nostalgic text about a memory from our past. "Remember when we used to?" I ignored them all. Then the messages started getting longer. She told me she missed us. Missed me. Missed the way I used to look at her. The way I held her. The way we could talk about anything. She said she was lonely now, that no one understood her the way I did. It was almost funny. Because if you read her messages, you'd think she was a widow mourning the death of a husband she had loved with all her heart. Like she hadn't been the one who destroyed our marriage with her own hands. Like she hadn't thrown me away for a temporary thrill. She wanted to pretend she was the victim. I wasn't interested. Then one day, she sent a message that actually made me pause. "We don't have to remarry. We can just live together again." I stared at my phone for a long time, rereading those words. I imagined her sitting wherever she was, actually believing that I'd be desperate enough to take her back under any circumstances. That maybe, just maybe, I'd be weak enough to let her crawl back into my life. So I sent her one final message. A message that made it clear there was nothing left to salvage. Go cohabit with your young lover. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. She didn't reply after that. Maybe because she finally got the message. Maybe because she knew there was nothing left to say. Some people throw away love for a fleeting moment of pleasure. They risk everything. Their home, their marriage, the person who would have stood by them no matter what, for a temporary thrill. And when they finally realize their mistake, it's already too late. I moved past her. I built something new for myself. And if you ever find yourself in my shoes, I hope you do the same. Life has a way of testing us in ways we never expect. Trust can take years to build and only seconds to destroy. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes, walking away is the strongest thing you can do. No screaming. No begging. No second chances. Just quiet, undeniable closure. But let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have confronted her right away? Sought revenge? Given her a second chance? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it with them. They might need it more than you think.